Hey, welcome to the Radical Care for Christian Counselors podcast with me, your host, Bethany Boring. If this is your first time listening to this podcast, well, this is a podcast for Christian counselors, mental health professionals, and pastoral care leaders who really want to get over the isolation and overwhelm by experiencing really deep transformational community and offering that community for everyone else, thus avoiding isolation and being completely overwhelmed with doing one-on-one. Now, with that being said, many of you all know this podcast, and especially the resources that Step Out and Thrive produces, can be used for anyone. All of us need community. All of us need community. Isn't that great? And all of us have relationships in our lives. So, with that being said, yes, although my primary market right now, my primary people that I'm talking to are Christian counselors, mental health professionals, pastoral care leaders, coaches, those that are actively engaged in the work of building and need community. But with that being said, I also know that this applies to missionaries, this applies to parents, this applies to I was just talking with someone the other day who owns a business, a secular business that has been using some of these principles and with his coworker. So it could be a wide variety of different things. And so I just want you to know, if you found yourself here, sometimes you just need a place where you can take a deep breath. Sometimes you just need a place where you want more ideas, more resources. Sometimes you just need a place like you question, am I the only one going through this? No, there is a community. There are people here to help you and be with you and walk with you. So, with that being said, if you would like to connect with Step Out and Thrive or any resources that we produce, you can just go to my splash page, bethanyboring.com. And on that page, you can get the resources that we're talking about right here in this podcast by connecting with the community. And yes, connecting with the community is free, but we also have paid tiers as well, depending on what all levels that you want to do with this. But we welcome you. We're glad you're here. And especially in this summer of 2024, we're so glad that you're here. Now, with that being said, we're right in the middle of a series, which is all about how to use Emmanuel Journaling, interactive appreciation, the very two heartbeat moments of what I do. I use these two practices all the time. And if you're in any of my groups, you know this. Like, you do not walk away from a group not knowing the skill, not experiencing the skill, but it can be applied in so many different ways. So the first couple podcasts that we've been talking about have all been about Emmanuel Journaling. And we covered a little bit, the first two, we really covered like why this is so important, why we do interactive appreciation, why we invite Jesus into these moments, kind of the practical, like, why is this so important? And then the last two, we kind of got right into the nuts and bolts of, okay, how does Emmanuel Journaling work? It has two different parts. And so if you've been following us, you either have been doing it or maybe thinking about doing it. And so with that being said, we're going to take over today, which is basically an example. Like, what does Emmanuel Journaling look like? Now, I didn't cover this in the last two, because I didn't want you guys to start there. So I'm hoping that if you're listening to this as your first episode right now, please go back and at least to two episodes back, where you can kind of experience what Emmanuel Journaling is, and then write one or two yourself before listening to an example. Now, I know if you're wired anything like me, it's like, no, I have to have an example. I have to make sure I'm doing this right. I want to get the full benefit of this. Let me tell you, if you follow the directions on that page and you take a deep breath and you allow yourself to just practice on your own first, you will get a huge benefit of it, because everybody kind of has different places in their life, and there's no quote right way of doing this. I think the danger we come into in these kind of practices is that we only have that one way. And if we hear Jesus or we hear God speaking to us in a different way, we're like, wait a minute, is that God? Because he's not speaking to me in that way before. And we don't get curious, we just automatically block it out. So with that being said, when we do these practices, it's more of an awareness, like, okay, like, God can be a part of my life, and God can show me things if I'm just still enough and I'm quiet enough and I really do pay attention to what he sounds like, how I experience this world through him. And that might seem a little weird for some of you guys. And so that's why I'm going to do this example here today, because some people are like, I'm confused as to what that means, especially with all these other, like, some people call them holistic, but just other practices out there that kind of, to my opinion, lead people astray. And that's not what this is. And so that's why I want to give this episode, this time here, to really share an example of what Emmanuel journaling would like and look like. And this is actually from my actual personal journal that I'll be sharing a little bit today. And because it's really hard for me to read on screen, I'm going to summarize a little bit of it, how it went, but I will be reading some of it for you guys today. So again, it has two different parts. The first part is you are just asking God to bring to mind a moment within the last week, within the last 2 weeks. And after you practice this, you can go, wow, I want you to bring to mind just any memory, God, that you want to bring to me, that you want to bring to my realization right now. And he can blast you back. It's just amazing what can come up out of that time. And so for this specific example, and I was in actually a group when this came up for me, and then I was able to just jot it down at that time when I was doing that group. And I knew this moment. I'm like, God, I know this is on my mind. So sometimes you can bring this up in Emmanuel journaling, like God may have given you a memory in the middle of something else, and you don't always have the time to really process it right there. But it's an amazing memory, and you hadn't thought of it. So you're not trying to figure out why it popped into your mind, but it's just like, okay, I would love to go there with you, God. Like, I would love to spend more time in these moments. And so as I was in one of my groups, somebody reminded me about playing instruments. And this is the memory that came up. I was reminded that I started playing violin in elementary school. And I don't remember the whole idea, but I remember me sitting in a chair. There was only a couple of us there. It was an invitation or an opportunity to see if it was something that we'd like to do. And I remember the very first time I was sitting there, and I had if you're playing guitar, it'd be the fretboard. Okay. But the neck of the violin was faced like this. And I was actually kind of strumming it like a guitar. And I was like, wait a second. If I can do, I loved it. There was something about the vibrations. There was something about the strings. Like, I wanted to play guitar, but at the time it just wasn't going to work out. And so I was sitting here strumming the strings. I can look at the orchestra teacher, and I could see him in front of me, and it was just one of those things, like I just felt this pulsing through my body, like I felt fully alive. And I was just remembering I was just playing around with the notes. And granted, I had only had the violin for like a couple times. So not even a long time. So you're starting from the very beginning, and I was in like fourth grade. So this is the very, very beginning, you guys. And I just remember I was sounding out songs by ear. Like, I was having a blast with this. So when that memory came back up, I was like, God, can you show me what I was seeing at that moment? And so when I was writing, I'm like, I could see my teacher standing in front of me, and I remember him smiling and just coming over to me and making sure that my hands were in the right place and just letting me enjoy the moment. I remember hearing the sounds of the strings as I plucked them, and the vibration like in my body. Like, I remember it was on my legs. So I just remember like feeling, this is so cool. And as a fourth grader, I was like, this is awesome. I loved it. I remember just tasting, like, I remember my mouth was open. Again, I had not thought about this memory in years, you guys. But I remember my mouth was open and I still remember, even as I was playing, sometimes I would open my mouth. I don't know if it's a processing thing. I don't know. But I know the feeling of when I was actually playing and it was on my chin. I know that feeling of when I was opening my mouth just a little bit and the vibrations would hit different parts of my jawline. And I remember how that felt in my head and how it would go down my spine and how it just, like, the energy of that music, the energy of that moment, and what it felt like to be doing that. Inside, when I was sitting there on that chair, I remember I was sitting, but I just remember just leaning forward, just excited for what I was about to do. When I got quiet with Jesus and I let him speak to me about that moment, this is what he said back. He calls me kiddo. That's kind of a name that I feel like we have back and forth. So, kiddo, I'm so proud of you. This moment means so much to you, but can you even imagine how much this moment means to me? As you were sitting there that day, looking your teacher in the eye and feeling so excited about what was going on, you see, I knew I had already planned for this moment to be a place of freedom for you. Do you remember the days where you would go back to your room with tears in your eyes, with just a hardness and isolation that you felt? You got to go to your bedroom, bring out the violin, and all of that seemed to melt away. Do you remember sitting in your bedroom practicing putting the bow on the strings? Do you remember how hard that was for you to do with a short right arm? Do you remember how hard you had to practice? And even the rubber that they had to stick on the bow in order to get your hands to grip. And so many people thought that you couldn't do it, but my daughter, I know you could. And I helped you. And I was with you. Do you remember when you played the violin, how you would just sway back and forth? And you could shut your eyes and you knew exactly what your bow was doing and where your fingers went on the strings. Even today, you can take your fingers and pretend like you're playing. That's me. I'm the movement. I'm the one moving your fingers. I'm the one that's helping your heart beat. I'm the one that gives your ears the tune in order to play the music that I've already given into you. I'm so proud of you. Keep leaning in to what I'm already doing. I love you. Keep playing. Keep listening. Just be mine. And that's what he wrote me. And I never thought about any of that. Like, it just blows my mind. I've forgotten, not that I've forgotten, but I'm not aware of those things. And you can see what God brought to me in that memory. And so I will say this, and I haven't done this on camera. So if you're watching the video, this is how many of you guys don't know, but I have Charge syndrome. And being that I have a lot of different physical challenges, and most people won't know. If you're watching the video, maybe you can see that the eyes don't always, look at the camera right. There's a right way to do it. But I visually impaired. So I am blind in my left eye and very much visually impaired in my right eye. I wear hearing aids, so deaf in my left ear, a lot of hard of hearing in my right ear. And the most noticeable to most people are my hands. So this is my left hand. This is a little bit backwards on here. And this is my right hand. And to most people, this is about the only movement my right hand can do. And so if you're listening to the audio, it can kind of circle, I guess, in my wrist. And my fingers have some movement. I can hear, like I can move some of my fingers around, but that's all it can still do. And this is with a lot of physical therapy and a lot of work. And I can play drums. I held my kids, when they were little with my right hand and balanced them while I was doing different things. I play basketball. I do so many different things, but back in the fourth grade, it was still curious about what I could do. And so you can imagine those moments. And I never remember wrestling with it. But as I was holding the violin, I had to learn with my right hand how to do the bow. And that took a lot of muscle. That took a lot of practice on my end. I was in pain a lot of times, but eventually it became pain free and it became a source of freedom for me. And that's what God really allowed that to come back into my memory, back into my mind. And he's right. I literally sometimes fall asleep doing this. If you're not listening, if you're listening to the audio, I take my thumb and I could put my three fingers down and I could literally play songs back in my head that I learned how to do in violin. So why am I sharing all this? Why is this such an interesting thing? Why do I keep on doing these Emmanuel journaling practices? All I have to do is I have to go back. And if somebody says the word violin, right now I could go back. I could go back to the sights. I can go back to the smells of that moment. I can go back to the words that I believe God gave me for that moment. I can take a lesson or two or three back that I could share with my kids, that I could share with clients, that I could share with people that come in my life. I can see the stones of remembrance that God has put up and erected in my life that I can look back and say, there was God. It allows me to come to him and spend quality, amazing time with him. So when I go back into my current reality, I see things differently because of what I've experienced with him. And I know it's true because I can see where he's guided me since then. Can you imagine just spending just a little bit of time, maybe even 3 times a week, doing these practices on your own? And the power that that can do in and through your current realities. You can feel like life is falling apart around you, but spending just a little bit of time and asking God to bring a memory back and letting Him really speak to you, whatever that looks like. You don't even have to write it. You can be walking along the sidewalk. You could be making dinner. You could be driving to and from work. But there is power when you actually write it down because you can go back and look. And I haven't done it yet, but I know there's a picture, this old picture of me that I have in my possession of me playing violin. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to put that in this entry that I wrote. And I digitize all my entries. Sometimes I speak it into my phone and I save that audio so that I can either have it transcribed or I can sit and I can type what I'm doing and how that process is going. And so I have that. That's a techie way of doing it. You don't have to do it that way, but there's just some thoughts. So I hope this was helpful to you. Again, I am so glad you're on this journey. If you want community and you're trying to practice this and nobody around you is doing it, or maybe you're not even sure how to like get people interested in this, join the community. The first level is completely free. And right now we're going through the podcast series together right there on that first level. We want you to be able to engage with that. So again, I can't promise all of this will stay the same past the summer, but it's just a way of getting people in the door, getting people used to what the community looks like and feels like. And I really do want discussions. I really do want to support you in this journey. So with that being said, would love to have you as part. If you're a counselor, mental health professional, pastoral care leader, if you're doing this kind of stuff on a regular basis and you want a really tighter community, there's higher levels for you. We would love to have you as a part of this. With all that being said, I'm with you. You have a place here. I'm so proud of watching you step out and thrive. With all that being said, have a great week. Talk to you guys later. And remember, dare to do more than just survive. Step out and thrive.